NFL Draft Week is here, and rumors suggest the Denver Broncos may be looking to trade up into the first round a little bit higher than the 20th overall pick. We'll go into why that is a good idea. We'll also look at the cons of that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. This is the place to be. So thank you so much to everyone in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, it's so easy to become one. All you have to do is hit that subscribe or that follow button wherever you get your podcast, and you'll never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team here. Locked On Broncos. As always, I'm your host, Cody Roark, credentialed Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work over there at milehighsports.com.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, the site expert at predominantlyorange.com.
And together you get a jam-packed, awesome Broncos podcast every single day, all year long. And look, Broncos Country, it's a big week this week. The NFL Draft is officially here, and there's nothing slower than the build-up to the NFL Draft when the week it's actually here. You're going to hear a lot of rumors. You see a lot of smokescreen. But what's real? We'll break that all down here. Obviously, one of the bigger rumors we'll kick off on today's episode of the show, the Broncos are rumored to be interested in trading up from the 20th spot overall. What would that be, and who would the ideal target be for them to do just that? We'll dive into that. Plus, we'll look at the pros and cons of maybe trading up in this year's NFL Draft. The Broncos, in order to do so, may have to give up future capital, maybe a player. Is that worth it? We'll look at that. And the Broncos reported on Monday for their voluntary offseason program. What does that look like? What is the team participating in the next 2 weeks? And then when will they transition into on-field work? We'll get into all that on today's episode of the show. Sayre, let's kick things off, obviously, with, as we know, the NFL Draft, the week of the rumors escalate. We heard from Broncos general manager George Payton and head coach Sean Payton last week. And one thing that George said in terms about the inner workings of trade calls last week when he met with us in a press conference, he said, you know, the week before the draft, you have calls, but really it gets aggressive the week of the draft. And rumors suggest here, according to Adam Schefter, that the Broncos have made calls. They've been one of the teams that have been interested in making calls about moving up in this year's draft. Is it smokescreen? Is it real?
That's what I'm wondering. Just like everybody else, right? Because there's the, you know, the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, right? This time of year that's saying, hey, trade up. You need to trade up. You need to go get your guy. And then there's the angel on the other side that's like, no, stay put, trade back, get more picks, you know, load up the war chest, all these sorts of things. What's fascinating to me is that simultaneously, trading up for the Denver Broncos in this particular draft would make a ton of sense and would make no sense at all. It would make a ton of sense because, look, you could go get maybe the best playmaker in this class offensively with Ashton Jeanty, right? If you can move up high enough to get Jeanty, he could be the missing piece to your roster. So in that sense, I mean, trading up does kind of make a little bit of sense, right? But then, you know, on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, this draft is deep at the positions that you need the most: running back, tight end, defensive line, wide receiver, all these different positions. They could help your team tremendously get over the top in the AFC. So, Cody, to me, I don't know how to read into this. I don't know exactly what to. I know that one thing we do know is that George Payton said last week at the pre-draft presser, right? He talked about how they've already made preliminary calls to just about every team in the NFL. So they've talked to everybody. It's not news that the Broncos have called teams about trading up, because George Payton told us last week that he's already talked to everybody and they have scenarios. But what's interesting about the timing of the rumor is that it comes this week, which is the week that George said, hey, this is when things start to get serious.
Yeah, and part of me is wondering, you know, Adam Schefter, obviously, when he said that, part of me is wondering if he was just referencing what George said in the pre-draft presser about, you know, we've had calls initially here next week, you know, when the draft does come, where, you know, that's when talks get stronger. I do wonder if that's probably what he piggybacked off of, because even last week, Adam Schefter on NFL Live went out there. This was after the pre-draft press conference, and he talked about guys like Travion Henderson. He talked about guys like Colston Loveland, Omari and Hampton a little bit. You know, Sean's looking for that next Joker. Like, that was the conversation. So it wasn't like Adam Schefter was saying anything that we didn't necessarily know, but I did find it interesting. Like, okay, how valid is this? I think the names you want to keep an eye on when it comes to maybe the pulse on the Broncos from a national scale, I would say Tom Pelissero. We've noted that relationship that he and George Payton certainly have there. I think Jordan Schultz has it in somewhere. I'm very curious to figure out where that is, but Jordan Schultz seems to have a little bit of a finger on the pulse of the Broncos as well. To me, ultimately, Sayre, I think we got to look at it from a multitude of ways. I think you make some great points. Like in this year's draft, like the Broncos aren't in a position where it's like they have to be desperate. Like you need to trade up and get a guy just to get the guy. They said it, and this is where we got to invest. Do we take value in what they're saying, where they believe at 20th overall they can pick a player of the same quality who's going to be available with the 10th overall pick? Or is that them trying to say, hey, maybe we want to get to the 10th overall pick and then be able to pick a player there? If they do, let's say hypothetically trade up here, Sayre, who do you think they go after? I know you mentioned Ashton Jeanty, but obviously the Las Vegas Raiders at 6th overall are the team that everyone is pegging them to pick Ashton Jeanty. I can't see Denver going from the 20th overall pick to pick number 5 and leapfrog in there. That makes things very interesting, though. If the Giants are interested in trading back, which has been a reported rumor, that would be interesting. But why would they want to drop all the way back when they can get a player like Travis Hunter at 3rd overall or an Abdul Carter as a pass rusher? So to me, like the Giants don't necessarily make a lot of sense for Denver to just say, hey, we're going to go from 20. We want to get all the way up to 3rd overall here at this point. I don't see that happening.
I don't either. I think that there's also been some steam gaining towards the Jaguars at 5 being interested in drafting Ashton Jeanty, and perhaps that would kind of take all these scenarios off the table, because I don't know that I would see anybody outside of, Jeanty, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. Those guys are all generally considered top 10 players in this particular class. Maybe Mason Graham, Cody. I'm actually putting together a scenario right now where he falls to 11th overall to the 49ers, because if the Jaguars don't take him at 5 and the Raiders don't take him at 6, what could happen there? So I don't think he's necessarily a blue chip guy worth trading up for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the 32-inch arms, the question marks there. So not that that's the biggest deal in the world, but it might be the difference between trading a future 1st or 2nd round pick to go up and get a guy. So that to me is where I start to wonder, okay, who is that right guy that you'd be willing to trade multiple picks for? Because we know Javonte Williams has led this team in touches the last 2 seasons. That running back position is going to get a lot of work. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to find the guy in round 1, because Sean Payton has found him just about everywhere. George Payton has found him just about everywhere. And Sean even commended George for drafting a guy who had a 1st round caliber in Dalvin Cook a handful of years ago when he was with the Vikings. He called him out by name during their press conference as well. And so I think the Broncos really do believe they can get that guy on day 2. So now it's just going to be about, all right, let's put our money where our mouth is then. Let's see if you really believe that, or if you truly believe that Jeanty is head and shoulders above every other running back that you could have in this draft, that you say, we have to get him at any cost, at every cost, whatever it costs, we have to go up and get him. That's got to be the mentality of them saying, we believe we can contend in the AFC if we get player X. It has to be Jeanty, in my opinion.
Well, and they believe that their offensive line is fully intact, at least at 4 of the 5 positions there. They love their offensive line. We know it's one of the highest graded units by the team itself in that category. So they believe they have the offensive line to get it done. And now it's just about finding, I think, that right running back to be the fit. If Denver were to somehow try to trade into the top 10, Sayre, I imagine they'd have to obviously swap with the 20th overall pick. But part of me thinks they'd have to also give up a 1st rounder next year, which I don't know. Is that something the Broncos are willing to take a gamble on? It's an interesting question. We'll see. I mean, Broncos Country, we're going to have long to find out. Here in just 48 hours, the NFL draft happens, and you're going to get coverage here, Locked On Broncos, as the Denver Broncos make their selection, 20th overall, or whether these rumors are true and they decide to move up. But make sure you let us know your thoughts on whether or not you want the Broncos to stay put at 20th overall, or if you'd like them to trade up. Let us know your thoughts here on today's episode of the show here. But Broncos Country, we're going to dive into the pros and cons and why the Broncos should entertain trading up. But we'll also tell you why maybe trading assets to move up isn't the smart move for the Broncos in the window that they're in right now with Bo Nix. You'll get that much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment just feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be part of that without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. And Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. And prices on the app, they will actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%.
I love the fact that they have last-minute deals where you can get tickets cheaper the closer that it gets to tip-off. Because, look, as the Denver Nuggets go on the road against the Los Angeles Clippers, if you're a Nuggets fan out there in Los Angeles, well, it gives you the perfect opportunity to go in and get tickets at a great price. And also inside the app, they have a seat views feature, which allows you to see the action from where you're going to be from the tickets that you're going to buy. It's the perfect opportunity to have complete peace of mind when buying tickets to the NBA playoffs. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Do the Denver Broncos want to have a small targeted draft class in 2025, or do they want to take advantage of the depth of this class? Well, we have a case for both here at Broncos Country, but trading down, it's probably the way to go for the Denver Broncos. We're going to tell you why on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And thanks once again to all of you that make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. If you haven't already become an everyday listener, hit subscribe wherever you listen, as well as on YouTube. Let's talk about pros and cons of trading up or down in the NFL draft. And we'll start off with, Cody, I think the pros and cons of trading down, because we kind of discussed in segment one, like, hey, trading up, you're going after a guy, you're giving up future capital, potentially even a future first-round pick to get him. And we talk about how deep this draft is at positions of need for the Denver Broncos. And so, of course, the one real con of trading down in this kind of a draft is that, well, we got to sit there all night Thursday night only for the Broncos to potentially not make a selection. But the pros vastly seem to outweigh the cons when it comes to trading down.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, trading down allows you to acquire more draft capital, which can be in return used to trade back up. Like there's so many moving pieces, right? So let's say Denver were to trade out of the 20th spot, and let's say they traded back, 5 spots. Okay, well, they swapped there, but maybe they acquire a back end round 2 pick. Maybe they acquire an additional round 3 pick at that point. And then it's like, all right, we know here at 25, we can get a player that we have highly graded on our board based on how things are going. We believe we're going to get a quality player at 25, but we also have back-end capital now in round number 2. We get an additional second, or we get an additional third. That allows us to make quality depth additions here to your roster. So it is kind of like just playing like the numbers game a little bit. Well, I think a lot of people look at it like, well, if you're picking 25th or if you're picking 28th, it's like if you have the luxury of being a Super Bowl team and you're picking 32nd overall, people are like, well, you're not going to get a great player at 32nd overall, but you're going to get a good one. You have to weigh the balance of that. And so what is more valuable here to the Broncos in terms of where they're at? Now, think of it this way. TreVeyon Henderson. Let's say Denver traded back 5 spots to 25th overall. TreVeyon Henderson could still be there, right? Or it gives you additional capital in the second. Say, okay, we're going to swap with another team to move up to the early portion of round number 2 to get Henderson, so he's not taken before, the Broncos have a chance to get him. I think trading back gives you more flexibility, though I will say Sean Payton is not the type to really trade back throughout his career. He's more so of a trade-up guy. George likes to trade back and acquire more capital. This is their 3rd year together, and we've seen a little bit of balance. We've seen some give and take here. I think really the first year that we had George and Sean together, obviously the 2023 NFL draft, you saw them trade up into round number 2 to get Marvin Mims. And then you saw them obviously select Drew Sanders with their round 3 pick, trade back into round 3 to get a Riley Moss. So we've seen them be aggressive. We've seen them acquire more picks as well by trading back or swapping with the team, but it hasn't necessarily been the first round value. That's where this is all new. This is the 2nd time in a row, really outside of last year. Look, you had Bo Nix. That was a huge need. But now you enter a year where the Broncos don't necessarily have to go out there and say, hey, we must go get this guy or bust. They're not in that position this year, whereas the running back position they've detailed. They have a lot of really good runners in this draft that they like. D-line, there's a lot of really good depth. So for me, just hearing what George and Sean said about how they view running back and D-line, I don't see them necessarily trading up, to be honest with you. I know we talked about that in the first segment. I don't see them trading up. I see them staying put or trading back because, hey, you trade back, acquire more capital. Let's say you get your running back in round 1 or you get a D tackle in round 1. Well, now you can go out there and get a running back in round 2, and then you can just load up with other assets there to build overall depth, because this draft is really outside of maybe running back. You're not drafting a starter here in round 1.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating is, like we've talked about, Sean Payton has said, or George Payton has said, that you might not get a very different player at number 20 that you could get at 10 in this year's draft. And there's not a lot of differentiation in the grades on these guys, at least from what they're saying publicly. And so maybe you feel like if you move out of round 1, let's say a team like the Giants or the Cleveland Browns is really desperate for a quarterback that's there at 20 overall, and they say, hey, here's pick number 33 and pick number 60, whatever it is, and then you can add a number of picks in the top 100. I feel like you're upgrading from potentially getting 3 starters in this draft to getting 4 to 5 potential starters out of just the day 2 picks in this draft. And that might not be something that this team wants to scoff at after missing out on, the first 2 rounds almost entirely of the 2022 and 2023 drafts if they hadn't snuck in with Nick Bonito and Marvin Mims, obviously. But this team doesn't have a ton of recent top 50 picks on the roster, which is big in terms of roster building and development and really having a contender for the long haul. That's the big deal with Denver right now, is this team is not rebuilding. This team is not reloading. This team is not resetting. This team is building upon. This team they've moved into the house, right? They're trying to find, hey, what size of TV do we want in the living room? What kind of couch do we want to get? What kind of fridge do we like? We've got the house, we've got the foundation, we've got the key components. Now we need to start thinking big, dreaming big. Do we want to get a wood kitchen table? What kind of wood do we want to get? What kind of color do we want it to be? They're moving in. They've got all the big stuff. They now need to get the furnishings. They need to feel like, hey, now this house, it's become our home. That's what this draft has to be for the Denver Broncos, and they don't need to trade up in order to make that happen.
I relate to what you say so much right now in my own life because, my fiance and I were getting ready for our wedding, and there's things like we go through like needs and wants, and it's like, oh, I want this. Like, you fill out your registry and it's like, what do we need? Like, what is it that we're going to need? She goes, need this, but I want this. For example, we got a really nice coffee pot. I didn't need it. I wanted it. Whereas she wanted the immersion blender, said, oh, that's actually something that we need. We need a KitchenAid. So for the Broncos, I think, Sayre, you nailed it perfectly. The foundation is there. The overall roster, like your starters on offense and defense, almost every position is accounted for in terms of your starters, who's going to play high impact minutes, who's going to be your key rotational guys. It's about adding quality players and depth that are going to help you not just this year, but maybe 2 years, 3 years down the road. But you want to have high quality players that fit the mold of your team DNA. And I think that's exactly what Sean Payton and George Payton are going to do in this year's draft. Look, there's no simple answer to it by saying, hey, like Denver's going to go aggressively get this one guy and it's going to change their landscape, right? The odds of one player doing that, it's very low, but there's always a possibility, right? All it takes is the right player going to the right situation, which Denver, I think for some players is an ideal fit for a lot of these draft prospects that are coming in here that obviously going to have their names called on night number 1 here. But I really think the meat and bones of this is going to be in rounds 2, 3, 4, and then obviously they have multiple picks in round number 6 here. Will they acquire somehow a 5th round pick? Will they make a draft day trade? Like, this roster is in a position where it could be tweaked a little bit, but you don't have to make widespread changes. Denver's got the foundational pieces, the bricks that are going to keep the foundation sturdy. They've got those in place. And with the quarterback like Bo Nix, now it's about, can we make him better? Can we, not necessarily just him. Obviously, there's an evolution of his own performance where he has to be as a player at that position. But it's, can we get the pieces around Bo Nix that are going to allow him to thrive? Can we get the defensive players, the right defensive guys that are going to get him more opportunities to possess the football, to get off the field? That's one thing the Broncos want to do a little bit more of this season. And it's multifaceted. It's not just, hey, let's get Bo Nix as many weapons as possible, because guess what? You only have 11 guys on the field at one time. So as much as cool as that would be to be able to get, all these guys, build it the right way. And I think that Sean and George, they're aligned on what that right way is. And I think Thursday, we're going to find out exactly. We're going to get clarity, cemented concrete evidence about what that may be.
Yeah, I do too, Cody. I really believe that this is the draft that's going to be pivotal in Bo Nix's development. Whether you talk about the weapons around him or whether you talk about the future of that defense that's going to be supporting him, right? Because just like you talk about furnishing a home with, TV and table and couch and all these things, like when we moved into my house, like we were like, well, we got to get a fence, we got to get a security system. And those are things that you don't really like spending money on that stuff. You don't really like the idea of that. It's much more fun to say, hey, what size of TV do we want? How comfortable of a couch can we find? Those things are way more fun, but you're glad you have the fence. You're glad you have the security system. Those types of things are multi-year investments, just like a D lineman would be in round one for the Denver Broncos. And so it's very open-ended. I think what would please all parties here, and that's not what the Broncos are going to do. They don't necessarily care about, hey, I want to make every fan out there happy, but what would please everyone is to trade down and get 4 to 5 picks in the top 100 or have 5 to 6 picks in the first 4 rounds. That would really, I think, set this draft off for the Broncos in 2025.
Well, Broncos Country, let us know your thoughts on whether or not the team will invest in trading down, acquiring more capital. If you were the GM, what would your area of emphasis be? Make sure you let us know here in today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. We're not done yet. Broncos Country still got a lot to break down. Well, Broncos football is getting closer. Look, we got the draft this week, but players reported on Monday for the start of the team's voluntary offseason program. We'll tell you who showed up and what the voluntary offseason program in phase 1 means for the franchise here in today's episode, Lockdown Broncos.
Today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? I mean, you could turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles from the favorite EA Sports College Football 25 or to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as you easily you stream your favorite shows. Now your games, it's made simple. It's all on your Fire TV, and there's endless entertainment with 4K streaming. You can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more.
And you watch, obviously, your favorite shows in the best quality of 4K. Well, now it's time to take your gaming experience to the next level. I love playing the new EA Sports College Football game. I've been playing that, going through my own team builder with the team that I played for and getting deeper into it. But it's better when it's 4K experience on whatever device that you have. And that's where the Amazon 4K TV stick can come in handy here. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required, available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. The fourth quarter action of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is here. You know what else is here? The team's voluntary offseason program. Broncos Country, thank you once again for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. Thanks to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. We appreciate you so much. You make the show exactly what it is. And look, if you have friends who don't know about this show, share this episode with them. Get them on board of the Locked On Broncos train, the best Broncos podcast out there in the entire podcast sphere there. We appreciate you so much. Sayre, look, some good news for Broncos fans as we're getting one step closer to the Broncos being back on the field. Players are back at the team facility. Monday was the start of the team's voluntary offseason program. We knew Cortland Sutton was there. We knew Bo Nix was there, a handful of other teammates like Frank Crum, Nick Gargiulo. But this is the voluntary portion, right? So it's not necessarily mandated. But I know internally, coaches, they want the players there. And that was the appeal. Sean Payton told us at the end of the year, it's like, hey, we have players still at the facility. Like, this is an appeal to us. Training here, there's a benefit. There's tangibleness. Like, there's good results to staying healthy. And if you do it here, you're more than likely going to stay healthy. And obviously, it's just, it's another opportunity to make an impression. Now, the voluntary offseason program, phase 1, Sayre, it's the boring part. It's the part that Broncos Country doesn't want to hear about because they want to know when everyone's going to get on the field. When are we going to see some on-field stuff? That's not going to happen until after the, 2 weeks after the phase 1 program begins. You jump into phase 2. right now the Broncos, they can only show up for offseason conditioning, strength and conditioning, and obviously meetings. They can participate in meetings at the team facility, but also physical rehabilitation, which are all the players who've been injured, who were on IR last year, who had surgery. They've been at the team facility already getting treatment. So that's going to continue. But after 2 weeks, you move on into phase 2, where you can do some on-field stuff, where you can practice the perfect play, but you cannot, it's not offense versus defense. It's individual drills and it's install stuff. It's not quite where you want it to be, but you have to be smart with how you get these players along here. But the football stuff is coming.
Yeah, and attendance is going to be the focus of the storylines from this, Cody, because like you said, everything's voluntary. It's not mandatory yet at this point, but I still think attendance is going to be worth monitoring, especially with as many interesting contract situations as are currently going on with the Denver Broncos. And we know Courtland Sutton is planning on being at the voluntary stuff. I think he seems to be pleased with how negotiations are going, even though it sounds like deals won't be done until after the drafts with any of these potential guys. I'm fascinated to see, does Zach Allen show up? Does John Franklin Myers show up? Is there any other surprise players that we could potentially see holding out here of the voluntary stuff? And of course, you say holding out with a bit of an asterisk, because it's not technically holding out unless it's mandatory. But anybody that's not there for voluntary stuff, I still think is going to be very worthwhile information to know, because we know that we're going to probably get to the bottom of why, certain guys aren't showing up, if that is the case.
Yeah. And so going back into phase 2 a little bit about this, you can have plays with offensive players lining up across from offensive players and defensive players lining up across from other defensive players, but there will be no live contact or no team offense versus team defense drills or anything like that. Those are not permitted. Phase 3 consists of the next 4 weeks of the program. After, phase 2 is 3 weeks. And then after that 3 weeks, then you have the next 4 weeks of the program. Teams may conduct a total of 10 days of OTAs. No live contact is permitted, but 7-on-7, 9-on-7, 11-on-11 drills are permitted. And these OTAs will take place for the Broncos on May 27th and 28th, and then June 3rd and 5th June 3rd through 5th. So 3rd, 4th, 5th before they hold mandatory minicamp June 10th, June 11th, and June 12th. But it doesn't say in here, though, Sayre, and this is what I'm curious about, because obviously the NFL draft is this week. We don't have anything about a rookie minicamp yet. I don't understand. We don't know when the dates are to that, but that is also something that usually takes place before your OTAs actually happens.
Yeah, and so there will be likely something right within the first couple of weeks after the draft. That's kind of when we usually see not only rookies getting onto the field for the first time, but lots of tryout players come in at that time of year as well. And you kind of get a chance to, see if you can unearth some diamonds in the rough, find some guys that could potentially contribute to your roster in a way. And I think that's always a fascinating time of year. And it's just great to have these guys throwing on the helmets, doing all that sorts of stuff. It's fun to see the players attend, and it's like your favorite TV show. You see all your favorite characters together, and you want to see the team bonding together. You want to see the team getting together for lifting. You want to see, the progress that guys are making physically. Players who were injured last year, what do they look like? How are they attacking the offseason program? That's always fascinating to see. Guys that I'm really interested in, Cody, I'm interested to see where Jonah Ellis is at. I'm really interested to see where Drew Sanders is at. And a number of other guys offensively. Like, what is Troy Franklin going to be putting on any weight? I don't know. I don't know what these guys are going to do. But just always fascinated to see, how do guys look at this time of year, because this is the time of year when they can go on vacation, they can go, to Nuggets games, all those sorts of things. How do they look when they report for the first time?
Yeah, and look, I know Sean is very big on players. Like, each player has a weight goal, essentially, that Sean wants them at, like a range there. And so guys coming in, you obviously want to come in shape, and you obviously want to be where your weight goals are specifically at there. I remember seeing an old NFL rule book out there, like team issued hand guides. And this isn't just for the Broncos, this is for other teams too. But teams back in the day, I can't remember which player it was that retired. I think it was JJ Watt shared it. But basically, if you show up overweight, you get charged a certain, like, you're fined a certain monetary amount, like $5,000 per week until you're not at your thing. Like, that's crazy to me that's in process. But I know that the Broncos, obviously, with their dietitians, their nutritionists, they've got players connected to everything that they need for their own programs. Obviously, with players now reporting for strength and conditioning, that comes in. That's part of that package deal there. They're going to get their meal plans. They're going to have access to the cafeteria to be exactly where they're at. But I'm with you. I'm very curious to see, where a guy like Drew Sanders is at, because obviously to play edge, he had to bulk up a little bit. Dude was really big. He was a brick house last year. So did he have to lose 5-10 pounds in order to be able to play at that linebacker position where he's going to compete with Justin Sternad and obviously Alex Singleton for that starting job next to Dre Greenlaw? I'm curious to see what weight they're going to have him at. Troy Franklin, I imagine they're probably going to keep him around the same exact weight that they had him last year. Maybe try to bulk up a little bit, but really I think they envision him to play that speed Z role, kind of similar where they're going to have Marvin Mims a little bit. Obviously, two different sizes when you look at 5'11" versus 6'2", but I factor in that, that's probably what's going to happen here for the Broncos. And yeah, will Jonah Ellis be ready for the team's voluntary offseason program? I mean, that's a big question. Obviously, after having the shoulder surgery, after suffering that injury and the Broncos loss against the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs, where's he at? Does that change their maybe their potential plans? But also keep in mind, last year, Sayre, around this time, during these workouts, that's when Drew Sanders suffered that Achilles injury. So knock on wood, hopefully no Broncos player suffers any kind of freak thing, and that they can get ready to go into OTAs and minicamp fully healthy, ready to rock and roll with a rookie class. And obviously their 90-man roster set here. But Broncos country, one thing, Sayre Bedinger, myself, we're going to keep you updated every single day, every step of the way leading up to OTAs, leading up to minicamp, training camp. This is the place to be for fresh, objective Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. Make sure you make Locked On Broncos part of your routine. And if you're a brand new viewer and you loved exactly what you got on today's show, become an everydayer by hitting that subscribe or that follow button here. But Broncos country, with that said, tomorrow's episode of the show, as we get closer to the NFL draft, it will be 24 hours away. The question is, where are the Broncos going? There's so many different things that Broncos country has sent in. So we're going to answer your mailbag questions on tomorrow's episode of the show. Broncos country, we'll see you then.